Blackburn here. Some of you know me as K.D. Blackburn. Some of you know me as Kid Burns. I'm a writer, and I was supposed to be going to Alaska this year. Some of you have read my blogs about the time in Alaska. This year they were called To the North and Sky. Well, obviously I'm not going to Alaska. Like everybody else, I am self-isolating at home. And I mentioned to some of the people that I interact with on Facebook that maybe I would like to read one of the works that I am doing a final edit on. When one does a final edit, they have to read the book aloud. And so it had some interest. So here we go. This is a work in progress. I hope to have it available by the end of April. But I'm going to read one scene per day. I'm going to start at chapter 1, scene 1. And the name of this book is Faults of Fools by K.D. Blackburn, myself, and it's a mystery. So, chapter 1, scene 1. They stood in a line, eldest to youngest, facing their parents. Stephen, second in line, adjusted his coat and gloves in preparation for leaving. "We should stay a bit longer," his elder sister said. "I've done my duty to the dead, Anna Maria. A bunch of my kids are coming over for dinner. Esther is probably clucking that the ham is getting overdone right now. Every year I tell her I won't be home till after 5. Every year she plans dinner for 4:30. Three heads of short gray hair and one with a blonde ponytail gave Jan and Alzbeta Sizik a farewell nod. The single stone with the double death engraving, 20 years old and only 9 days apart, would patiently wait for the next New Year's Day. Thaddeus helped his two sisters into his blazer, Elena in the back seat to be sure, and followed his brother's car slowly along the winding cemetery lanes. The toot of his horn signaled his goodbye to Stephen as the cars turned in opposite directions outside the gates. The three of them always had New Year's Day dinner together. Alzbeta had left other, perhaps more useful things in Pilsen when the family immigrated to America in 1928, but her gold-rimmed china and crystal were wedding gifts intended to become family heirlooms. That made them as important to her as the clothing she packed for Anna Maria and Stephen. As a tribute to their owner, the dinnerware had its annual outing, coincidental with a visit to Elzbeta's grave. As always, to celebrate the new year, Elena served a traditional bohemian meal consisting of foods people generations dead in Czechoslovakia had considered to bring good luck. Never mind Elena herself had been born in Pittsburgh, and then in her whole life she hadn't been any further away than Steubenville, Ohio. While still at the table, after supper had been cleared away by Elena, she finished the ritual by ceremoniously pouring imported Pilsner Urquell into 3 gold-rimmed funnel-shaped glasses. They toasted each other to the promise of many more happy years in this life. No one mentioned that such a hope only made sense for Thaddeus. Given the choice, he would have followed Elena into the kitchen after they'd drained their glasses. The back half of the house had the stamp of her personality on it, and she was his favorite sister. He liked her penchant for overindulgence, most likely because it favored his own. However, Anna Maria had made it quite plain that he was to come into the living room and listen to what she had to say. The front rooms of the house were hers. To his eyes, the Institute for Fine Cherry Wood Furniture, if there was such a thing, was using her living room and dining room as showcases. A forest of fruit trees must have given their lives to serve his eldest sister's personal brand of collective excess. Anna Maria had settled herself onto the floral sofa. Her favorite ashtray balanced on her lap, awaiting the flakes cast off from the constant tapping of her cigarette. She directed Thaddeus into the perfectly coordinated plaid chair opposite her. Obeying her instructions as he had done for the majority of his life, he adjusted himself to as comfortable a position as possible in the stylish yet highly uncomfortable chair. He absolutely shunned the idea of putting his feet on the Queen Anne coffee table in front of him. Mentally, he prepared himself to be her audience. He was used to this. Anna Maria had been 27 years old when their mother had had their last, quite unexpected child. Thaddeus knew. Everyone knew. His eldest sibling had considered herself to be his third parent from the day he was born. He was unaware, because no one had ever told him, how she had pled with their parents to let her have him to raise. It was common family knowledge that she would never have a child of her own. Nobody ever said why. At the time of his birth, Jan and Elsbetta had felt truly sorry for their daughter and her husband Frank Kroc, but they kept their baby for themselves, even though most people assumed they were his grandparents. Anna Maria weighed in with, "I'm getting tired, Thaddeus. I want you to take my seat. I have my network behind me. I'll get them to back you. If I retire soon, we can get you in place without waiting for the next election." He crossed one leg over the other and adjusted the crease in his trousers, ran his tongue over his teeth, and gave his head a scratch. They'd been over this patch any number of times, so there was no hurry for him to tell her he was not interested. "You're a fine city councilwoman. When you retire, I am sure you will be sorely missed. But I am a teacher, not a politician." Hard-charging and caustic by nature, and only a little slowed by age, Councilwoman Kroc had her second volley at the ready. In truth, she hadn't wanted to mention it until she knew more, but she felt pushed by time. "You know I'm the chairwoman of the Buildings and Grounds Committee," she commenced, and Thaddeus nodded in agreement. "I was looking at some records on renovation contracts that the city had given out a few years ago. I came across the name of one of my present colleagues on the council." The cigarette smoke came out with the shape of her words, both of which he politely ignored. Instead, he listened to the sounds of Elena cleaning up the kitchen, wishing he was out there, leaning against the countertop, smiling at her prattle, enjoying her company. In her lifelong manner, Anna Maria had continued with her presentation of the facts and her opinions, despite his inattention. When she got to the word fire, he jerked his mind back to the sound of her voice. "I can't prove it, but his name was on the contract. I'm 70 years old, and I'm tired of the daily fight. I need you to do it for me." For the first time in a long time, Thaddeus gave his eldest sister a good long look. There was a discernible difference. Smaller, grayer all over. Years ago, little old ladies dressed like little old ladies. They wore little old lady shoes and fixed their hairs in buns. It used to be easier to accept their age. Today, 70-year-old women wear blue jeans and tennis shoes, headbands in their hair. It makes it all the harder to accept that they might be approaching the end of their allotted span, he decided. Holiday aside, Anna Maria was outfitted in her daily business attire, an expensive knit two-piece suit. This time it was a vivid fuchsia. Sheer hose, black leather pumps. Never more than a wisp of a woman in the first place, her weight barely made a dent on the cushion. Burnt paper holding its shape until a breath changed everything, he thought. When had she gotten so old? "I'm sorry," he said, shaking his head slowly, "but I can't. You know that." Propelling himself from orchestrated, understated elegance, he headed toward the domestic and unruly environment of Elena's domain in hopes of hearing humorous tales of how it all worked out when fates collided. The least likely of the siblings to be engaged as a stand-up comic, Elena had the timing of the best and the deadpan to go with it. Coupled with a viewpoint that could pluck out the absurdities of the human condition, she was a natural-born killer. She watched a fair amount of television and read the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from front page to last each day. A favorite hobby of hers was to search out, and then retell, edited versions of Earthly Hell and Pearly Gate stories. Her rendition of the crewman in the cargo hold of a plane with an Asian potentate's air-sick elephant made anyone within earshot choke with laughter. Elena could quote of real-life occurrences where a piano fell from hoists above a city sidewalk. "And the next thing I knew, St. Peter, is that I'm standing right here in front of you," was the last line of her many Gates of Heaven tales. Her audience would howl, while she, with barely a flicker of a smile, waited patiently. "I redid my bedroom with my big bingo winnings," Elena said, greeting her co-conspirator's sibling with a "we're-in-this-together" twitch of her lips. "Come up and have a look." As they headed up the stairs, Anna Maria called out from the living room sofa, "Brace yourself." In the late summer, Elena often sat bowls of cut hydrangea blossoms all over the house. She grew both pink and blue in her backyard garden. They were her favorite flowers. It became abundantly clear to whoever entered Elena's bedroom that some designer had shared the affection. Tadia smiled wildly, noticing that even her new ceramic plant pots resembled the pink blossoms. At least she'd shown a little restraint, he thought, as he leaned against the pink jacquard overstuffed chair to take it all in. Oh, she had reupholstered the chair, but at least not in the same fabric that made up the bedspread, curtains, and the side table's cloth. It was the usual Sizzix excess, all the way to wretched. "I love it," he beamed. "It looks just like you." An outright lie, and they both knew it. Little of Elena Sizzix, at age 64, looked like a riotous flower garden. Her gray hair was short and straight, short in stature, with short, unpolished fingernails. She defined the word nondescript. Today, in deference to the holiday and the annual family remembrance dinner, she was decked out in her dressy dark polyester pants and her fancy, flowery, yet subdued overblouse. Elena lit a cigarette from the pack laying on the painted white dresser. She positioned her ever-present ashtray on the bottom edge of the double bed and patted the space she wanted her middle-aged baby brother to set himself. "She paid for your education," tilting her head to indicate Anna Maria downstairs in the living room. "She's always looked out for what's best for you, both her and Frank." "Frank's dead, almost 12 years. It was wonderful of them to pay my tuition, but that was more than 20 years ago as well. You know I tried to pay them back when I sold Mama and Papa's house. They wouldn't take it. Besides, it's not money that Anna Maria feels I owe her." "No, it's not. Money only settles cash debts. It's useless for anything else." Elena played with the ash on the end of her cigarette, shaving it to a point. She studied the ashtray. Her slippered foot swung in a slow arc. During the quiet interlude, Thaddeus gave this sister a good long look, too. More than ever, he decided, she reminded him of a retired nun, and at the moment, one in prayer. Rather than interrupt her reverie, Thaddeus gave her redecorated room another once-over. A white cut-work magazine rack sat by the chair. His eyes strained to read the titles. They were the kind Happy Housewives supposedly read. This was Anna Maria's house, and certainly Elena's home, but Elena's place seemed to lie somewhere between homemaker and housekeeper. She had gone from their parents' home to their sister's when he was a child. Except for the time when she first became ill, then she wasn't in either place. Thaddeus had always assumed she was in a hospital in Ohio during those missing months. Paul Genser died last week. I read it in the obituaries. "Paul Genser? I can't place the name. Who was he?" "You didn't know him. Nobody important. Just a man I used to work for a long time ago." "Oh, yeah, I remember you used to work at some sort of electrical supply place when you still lived at home. I didn't know you kept up with anybody." "I don't," she said as she ground out her cigarette and showed him out of her private garden. End.